There is a difference between dying for something and choosing to. Most deaths in anime are imposed. An enemy is stronger. A situation becomes impossible. A character runs out of options and the story ends them. Those deaths are tragic, but they aren't disturbing in the way this list is disturbing, because the deaths and sacrifices on this list weren't imposed. They were chosen, deliberately, completely, with full understanding of what was being given up. And that choice is what makes them impossible to forget, because it raises a question that stays with you long after the scene ends. What would make you willing to do that? What would have to be true about your life, your love, your grief, your obsession, for you to arrive at that specific decision and make it without hesitation? The answer to that question is never comfortable, and the anime on this list understood that. They didn't present these sacrifices as heroic, they presented them as honest. And honest, in this context, is far more disturbing than heroic ever could be, because heroism is comfortable. Heroism tells you the sacrifice was worth it, that the story rewards the person who gave everything, that meaning arrives to fill the space where the loss used to be. These sacrifices don't offer that comfort. Some of them don't even offer resolution. They just offer the choice, made in full clarity, and the silence that follows it. Gon Freak says, Hunter x Hunter. The most extreme willing sacrifice in Hunter x Hunter isn't a death. It's something worse than death. Gon Freak says sacrifices his entire future. Not metaphorically, literally. Every year of growth he would ever experience. Every ability he would ever develop. Every ounce of power he would have accumulated through decades of training and effort and time. All of it traded away in a single moment, in exchange for access to it all right now. The transformation that follows is horrifying to witness. His body becomes the absolute peak version of itself. The version that could only have existed after an entire lifetime of work compressed into a single afternoon, and then used up, gone. What makes Gon's sacrifice so deeply disturbing isn't the power it produces, it's the purity of the intention behind it. There was no strategy, no calculation, no thought given to survival or consequence or what comes next, just grief. Grief so complete it dissolved every instinct for self-preservation Gon had ever possessed. Kite was gone. And in that moment, Gon stopped caring whether he survived. He didn't use the sacrifice to win. He used it because he had already decided that a future without being able to undo what happened to Kite wasn't a future worth having. That's not heroism. That's a nightmare wearing the shape of love. And the most disturbing part? He doesn't regret it. Even after collapsing, even after nearly dying, even after learning what it cost him permanently. The look on his face in the aftermath isn't grief over the sacrifice. It's the emptiness of someone who paid the price and found that paying it was still not enough, because Kite was still gone. And nothing Gon gave up changed that. That specific detail is what keeps this sacrifice on the wrong side of bearable. It didn't even work, not in the way he needed it to. The brutal truth underneath Gon's choice is that sacrifice doesn't guarantee meaning. It doesn't guarantee resolution. Sometimes it just guarantees loss stacked on top of loss, with nothing on the other side to justify the trade. And Gon made that trade anyway, not because he calculated it would work. Because in the moment, calculation had already stopped being possible. Itachi, Uchiha, Naruto, most sacrifices in anime involve giving something up. Itachi's sacrifice involved becoming something monstrous, and staying that way for years. When Itachi learns that his clan is planning a coup that would trigger a civil war and potentially destroy the village, he is given a choice by the leadership of Konoha. Stop it, or watch it happen. The method they offer is grotesque. He has to kill them himself, every single one, his clan, his family, the people who raised him, the community he grew up inside, all of them. And then he has to flee the village, join the criminal organization Akatsuki, and spend years being hunted as a traitor, being feared, being hated by the entire ninja world. And most devastatingly, by his little brother Sasuke. Itachi allows Sasuke to hate him. He allows Sasuke to believe he killed their parents out of ambition, out of twisted curiosity, out of cruelty. He constructs a lie so complete and so consistent that Sasuke dedicates his entire existence to revenge, and Itachi allows it, because he needs Sasuke to be strong enough to survive what comes next. And the only way to make Sasuke strong enough is to give him something worth hating. So Itachi gives him the most complete and devastating gift imaginable, himself, the monster, the betrayer. The nightmare that Sasuke can build his whole life around destroying. Here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. Itachi is dying. He has been dying for years. By the time he faces Sasuke in their final confrontation, his body is already failing. He fights that battle almost blind, in constant pain, using stimulants just to stay upright, and he loses on purpose. He allows Sasuke to win. He allows Sasuke to feel the satisfaction of killing the monster who destroyed their family, and then he dies, having never told Sasuke the truth. Having never let Sasuke know that the person he hated most was also the person who sacrificed everything to keep him alive. The most disturbing thing about Itachi's sacrifice isn't the scale of it. It's the silence. He carried everything alone, for years, without anyone to acknowledge it, without anyone to share it with. And he chose that silence as deliberately as he chose everything else. Because protecting Sasuke mattered more than being understood by him. That level of love is terrifying, because it requires the complete and total subordination of the self, not just the body, the reputation, the legacy, the very shape of how you will be remembered. Itachi didn't just die for Sasuke, he became a villain for him. And that is one of the most disturbing things any character in anime has ever chosen to do. Consider what it actually meant, practically, for Itachi to carry that secret. Every mission for the Akatsuki. Every encounter with former comrades who now saw him as a traitor and a monster. Every moment he could have corrected the record and chose silence instead. Years of that. Not a single dramatic scene of suffering, but a slow, grinding accumulation of it, spread across every ordinary day he had left. That's a different kind of sacrifice than the sudden, singular moment gone experiences. It's endurance. Sustained, deliberate endurance of being hated by the one person whose love mattered most to him. And he never once let it show. Minato Namikaze Naruto. Minato was 24 years old. He was the 4th Hokage, the strongest ninja alive. A man who had spent his entire life building something worth protecting. And on the night Obito attacked the village with the Nine Tails, Minato made a decision in seconds that most people couldn't make in a lifetime. He sealed half the Nine Tails inside himself using the Reaper Death Seal, and the other half inside his newborn son. His son, who was hours old, who had never breathed a breath outside the hospital. Who had no say, no understanding, no ability to consent to what was being placed inside him. The technique required Minato's death, not as a side effect, as a condition. He died knowing exactly what he was doing, knowing that his son would grow up without him, knowing that the village would survive. Knowing that the burden he placed inside Naruto would define that child's entire life. The disturbing part of Minato's sacrifice isn't the death. It's the weight he placed on a person who couldn't choose whether to carry it. Minato chose to sacrifice himself. He also chose to sacrifice Naruto's childhood, Naruto's social acceptance, Naruto's sense of belonging in the village, everything that came with being the container of the Nine Tails, every year of isolation, every classmate who kept their distance. Every person who looked at a small child and saw only the things sealed inside him. Minato made that choice for Naruto before Naruto had any capacity to refuse it. And that specific dimension of the sacrifice is one that the series handles honestly enough to be genuinely uncomfortable. The hero's sacrifice had a cost that landed entirely on someone else, and that someone else had to live inside that cost for the next 12 years before anyone acknowledged it. There's a particular kind of devastating irony in how the village treated Naruto during those years. They celebrated Minato as a hero for the sacrifice he made, and they punished Naruto, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly, for the sacrifice he never agreed to. The man who chose got remembered as a legend. The child who never got a choice got treated as a burden. That asymmetry is one of the most quietly disturbing details in the entire series, and it rarely gets the attention it deserves. Kacho Hunter x Hunter, Kacho and Fugetsu are twins, and they represent the only genuine emotional bond in the entire Succession War. Their goal is simple: not to win, not to claim the throne, to get each other out alive. Their guardian spirit beasts are built around exactly that. Kacho's ability provides an escape route for Fugetsu. Fugetsu's ability provides one in return. Together, they form a closed loop of mutual protection. Two abilities designed for one purpose: keep each other safe. And then, the Succession War forces Kacho into an impossible position. She discovers that the loop can only work in one direction at a time, and she uses it to send Fugetsu out of danger permanently. Griffith berserk. Griffith's sacrifice inverts that completely. He gives up everyone else to save himself. And that inversion is exactly what makes it belong on this list. Because it forces you to confront a version of willing sacrifice that isn't noble at all. Griffith spends years building the Band of the Hawk from nothing. He recruits, he trains, he leads, and he earns a loyalty from his soldiers that borders on worship. Guts, his closest companion, would have followed him into any darkness without question. And then Griffith is captured, imprisoned, and tortured for an entire year. His body is broken beyond recovery. His voice is destroyed. His ability to walk, to fight, to lead, all of it is taken from him. And in that state, broken and hopeless, he is offered a way out. The Eclipse, a ritual that requires a sacrifice. Specifically, it requires him to offer up the people closest to him in exchange for transcendence. And Griffith says yes, not under duress in the way people usually think of duress. He is given the choice, and he understands exactly what it means, and he chooses it anyway. Every member of the Band of the Hawk is slaughtered, people who trusted him completely. People who would have died for him without a moment's hesitation. He uses that trust as fuel for his own transformation. The reason this belongs on a list of willing sacrifices, even though Griffith is sacrificing others rather than himself, is that the moral logic underneath is identical. Griffith looked at the alternative, a life without his dream, a life reduced to nothing after everything he built was destroyed, and found it unacceptable. He decided that his dream mattered more than the people who helped him chase it. And he made that decision completely, without flinching. In the same way Gon decided grief mattered more than his own future. In the same way Itachi decided Sasuke's survival mattered more than his own reputation. The disturbing inversion is what it reveals about the nature of sacrifice itself. The same clarity of purpose that makes Itachi's choice devastating and Kacho's choice heartbreaking is the exact same clarity of purpose that makes Griffith's choice monstrous. Conviction alone doesn't make a sacrifice good, it just makes it complete. And Griffith's completeness, his total and unwavering certainty that his dream justified any cost, including the lives of people who loved him, is one of the most genuinely terrifying character choices ever put into anime, because it proves that the same psychological mechanism behind every noble sacrifice on this list can just as easily produce something monstrous. The line between Itachi and Griffith isn't the intensity of their conviction, it's only the direction they pointed it in. Griffith never hesitates, because, in his mind, hesitation would mean admitting that the dream was never worth pursuing in the first place. Everything he endured, every battle, every death that brought him closer to his kingdom, every sacrifice made by the Band of the Hawk before the eclipse, all of it would become meaningless if he turned away at the final moment. That realization is what makes the eclipse so horrifying. It isn't simply the birth of Femto. It's the moment Griffith decides that preserving his dream is more important than preserving the people who made that dream possible. The tragedy isn't that he lacked another option. It's that he looked directly at the cost, understood it completely, and accepted it without looking away. That's the part that lingers long after Berserk ends. Because the series forces you to acknowledge that Griffith never believed he was making the wrong choice. From his perspective, he was simply refusing to abandon the only purpose his life had ever known. And when someone can justify anything in service of a single purpose, there is almost no line they won't eventually cross. That's why Griffith remains one of the most disturbing characters in anime. Not because he sacrificed others, but because he convinced himself that sacrificing others was the only reasonable thing left to do. Yuki Tsukumo, Jujutsu Kaisen. Yuki Tsukumo is one of the most powerful sorcerers alive in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Her ability, Star Rage, allows her to detonate stars, drawing on cosmic scale destruction that few sorcerers could ever hope to match. She is not desperate, she is not cornered. She is not without options. When Kenjaku offers her a chance to fight seriously, to unleash a fraction of her true power against an overwhelming threat, she agrees, fully aware of what it will require of her. Star Rage's true potential comes at an almost unthinkable cost. To generate enough output to matter, Yuki must burn through her own remaining lifespan at an accelerated and irreversible rate. She doesn't hesitate. She activates it anyway, understanding completely that doing so will shorten however many years she might have had left. Understanding that every second of power she draws out is a second permanently subtracted from a life she has not yet finished living. What makes Yuki's choice so disturbing isn't desperation. It's the absence of desperation. She isn't backed into a corner with no other option. She simply decides, calmly, that this fight matters enough to trade years of her own future for it. There's something deeply unsettling about a sacrifice made without panic, made with the same tone you'd use to order a meal. It suggests a person who has already made peace with the exchange rate between her own life and the outcome she cares about. And that peace, that quiet, settled willingness, is more disturbing than any anguished, tearful final stand could ever be. Because it means she thought about this before the moment arrived. It means this wasn't new information. It was simply the moment the calculation she'd already made got put into practice. That quiet certainty is what separates Yuki from so many other sacrifices in anime. She isn't driven by revenge. She isn't consumed by grief. She isn't making an emotional decision in the heat of the moment. She's making a deliberate one. She understands the price, accepts it, and moves forward anyway. There is something uniquely unsettling about a person who can look directly at the years they still have left to live and willingly spend them for the possibility of protecting everyone else. It's not the power that makes the moment unforgettable. It's the calm acceptance behind it, because the strongest sacrifices are rarely the loudest. Sometimes they're made in complete silence, long before the battle has even begun. Yuki never asks whether the exchange is fair. She never stops to wonder if someone else should carry the burden instead. She simply decides that if her remaining years can create even a chance of stopping a disaster, then those years have already found their purpose. That mindset is difficult to understand because it isn't fueled by emotion alone. It's fueled by conviction. A conviction so complete that her own future becomes a resource she's willing to spend like any other. And that's what makes her sacrifice linger in your mind. Not because she gave up her life, but because she treated the possibility of losing it with such extraordinary calm. In a genre filled with dramatic final stands and emotional speeches, Yuki's decision stands out precisely because it doesn't need either of those things. She knows the cost, she pays it anyway. And that quiet acceptance is what makes her sacrifice impossible to forget. Final verdict. What every sacrifice on this list has in common is a specific kind of honesty. The people who made these choices didn't make them because they had no other option. They made them because they looked at the alternatives and found them unacceptable. Gon found a future without justice, unacceptable. Itachi found Sasuke's death, unacceptable. Minato found the village's destruction, unacceptable. Kacho found a world where Fugetsu didn't survive, unacceptable. Griffith found a life without his dream, unacceptable, and decided everyone else's survival was an acceptable price for avoiding it. Yuki found a fight worth losing years of her life over, and made that trade without needing to be pushed into it. And each of them paid whatever they had to pay, or made someone else pay it, to make the unacceptable thing not happen. That clarity of purpose is what makes willing sacrifices so disturbing to watch. Because it strips away every comfortable illusion that sacrifice is something that happens to people. It reveals that sacrifice is something people choose, sometimes with full information. Sometimes at impossible speed, sometimes with years of preparation, but always as a decision, always as a moment where a person looked at what was being asked of them and said yes. The disturbing part isn't the cost, the disturbing part is the yes. Because the yes implies a set of values so completely organized around something other than the self that dying, or destroying, or watching someone else pay the price becomes a reasonable option. Most people don't have values that organized. Most people haven't been tested in ways that would reveal whether they do. And watching these characters make their choices is disturbing precisely because it forces a question you weren't planning to ask. Would you? If it came to it. If the moment arrived? If the cost was everything, and the alternative was losing the thing you couldn't lose, would you say yes? And here's the harder question underneath that one. Would you be able to tell, in the moment, whether your yes was noble or monstrous? Because Itachi and Griffith both said yes with the same completeness, the same certainty. The only difference was what they were certain about. Most people don't know, and not knowing is the thing that follows you out of the room, long after the credits, long after the lights come back on. Still asking, still waiting for an answer you hope you never have to give. Because the truth, the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it, is that you probably won't know until the moment finds you. And by then, there won't be any time left to decide who you want to have been. That's what separates these sacrifices from ordinary acts of bravery. Bravery can't exist for a moment. A sacrifice like these exists long before the moment arrives. It exists in the beliefs people carry every single day, until one day those beliefs are tested. None of these characters suddenly became selfless when the crisis appeared. The crisis simply revealed who they had already decided to be. That's what makes these moments feel so real. They aren't transformations, they're revelations. The choice only exposes what was already there, and that's a frightening idea. Because it suggests that every person already has a line they would cross for something they love.